The 11th Book of Homer's Iliads, Part 1. The Argument. Atrides and his other peers of name lead forth their men, whom Eris oathed in flame. Hector, by Iris's charge, takes deedless breath, whiles Agamemnon plies the work of death, who with the first bears his imperial head, himself Ulysses and King Diomed, Eurypylus and Aesculapius' son, and forced with wounds the furious skirmish shun, which martial sight when great Achilles views, a little his desire of fight renews. And forth he sends his friend to bring him word from old Neleides, what wounded lord he in his chariot from the skirmish brought, which was Machaon. Nestor then besought he would persuade his friend to wreak their harms, or come himself decked in his dreadful arms. Another argument. Lambda presents the general in fight the worthiest man of all. Aurora out of restful bed did from bright Tithon rise, to bring each deathless essence light, and use to mortalize, when Jove sent Eris to the Greeks, sustaining in her hand stern signs of her designs for war. She took her horrid stand upon Ulysses' huge black bark, that did at anchor ride amidst the fleet, from whence her sounds might ring on every side, both to the tents of Telamon and the author of their smarts, who held for fortitude and force the navy's utmost parts. The red-eyed goddess, seated there, thundered the Orthian song, high and with horror, through the ears of all the Grecian throng. Her verse with spirits invincible did all their breasts inspire, blew out all darkness from their limbs, and set their hearts on fire. And presently was bitter war more sweet 1,000 times, than any choice in hollow keels to greet their native climes. Atrides summoned all to arms himself disposed. First on his legs he put bright greaves, with silver buttons closed. Then with rich cuirass armed his breast, which Cinyras bestowed, to gratify his royal guest, for even to Cyprus flowed the unbounded fame of those designs the Greeks proposed for Troy. And therefore gave he him those arms, and wished his purpose joy. 10 rows of azure mixed with black, 12 golden like the sun, twice 10 of tin in beaten paths did through this armor run. 3 serpents to the gorget crept, that like 3 rainbows shined, such as by Jove are fixed in clouds when wonders are divined. About his shoulders hung his sword, whereof the hollow hilt was fashioned all with shining bars, exceeding richly gilt. The scabbard was of silver plate, with golden hangers graced. Then he took up his weighty shield, that round about him cast defensive shadows. 10 bright zones of gold affecting brass were driven about it, and of tin as full of gloss as glass. Swelled 20 bosses out of it, in centre of them all, one of black metal had engraved full of extreme appall, an ugly gorgon compassed with terror and with fear. At it a silver baldric hung, with which he used to bear, wound on his arm his ample shield, and in it there was woven an azure dragon curled in folds, from whose one neck was cloven 3 heads contorted in an orb. Then placed he on his head his 4-plumed casque, and in his hands 2 darts he managed, armed with bright steel that blazed to heaven. Then Juno and the maid that conquers empires trumpets serve to summon out their aid, in honor of the general, and on a sable cloud, to bring them furious to the field, sat thundering out aloud. Then all enjoined their charioteers to rank their chariot horse close to the dike. Forth marched the foot, whose front they did reinforce with some horse troops. The battle then was all of charioteers, lined with light horse. But Jupiter disturbed this form with fears, and from air's upper region bid bloody vapors rain, for sad ostent much noble life should ere their times be slain. The Trojan horse at Ilus' tomb was in battalia led by Hector and Polydamas and old Anchises' seed, who godlike was esteemed in Troy by grave Antenor's race, divine Agenor, Polybus, unmarried Acamas, proportioned like the states of heaven. In front of all the field, Troy's great Priomedes did bear his always equal shield, still plying the ordering of his power, and as amidst the sky we sometimes see an ominous star blaze clear and dreadfully, then run his golden head in clouds, and straight appear again, so Hector otherwise did grace the vaunt-guard shining plain, then in the rear guard hid himself, and laboured everywhere, to order and encourage all, his armour was so clear, and he applied each place so fast, that, like a lightning thrown, out of the shield of Jupiter, in every eye he shone, and as upon a rich man's crop, of barley or of wheat, opposed for swiftness at their work, a sort of reaper's sweat, bear down the furrows speedily, and thick their handfuls fall, so at the joining of the host, ran slaughter through them all. None stooped to any fainting thought of foul inglorious flight, but equal bore they up their heads, and far like wolves in fight. Stern Eris, with such weeping sights, rejoiced to feed her eyes, who only showed herself in field of all the deities. The other in Olympus' tops sat silent and repined, that Jove to do the Trojans grace should bear so fixed a mind. He cared not, but enthroned apart, triumphant sat in sway of his free power, and from his seat took pleasure to display the city so adorned with towers, the sea with vessels filled, the splendor of refulgent arms, the killer and the killed. As long as bright Aurora ruled and sacred day increased, so long their darts made mutual wounds, and neither had the best. But when in hill environed vales the timber feller takes a sharp-set stomach to his meat, and dinner ready makes, his sinews fainting, and his spirits become surcharged and dull. Time of accustomed ease arrived, his hands with labour full. Then by their valours Greeks break through the Trojan ranks, and cheered their general squadrons through the host. Then first of all appeared the person of the king himself, and then the Trojans lost, Bianor by his royal charge, a leader in the host, who being slain his charioteer Oileus did alight, and stood in skirmish with the king. The king did deadly smite his forehead with his eager lance, and through his helm it ran, and forcing passage to his brain, quite through the hardened pan, his brain mixed with his clotted blood, his body strewed the ground. There left he them, and presently he other objects found. Isus and Antiphus, 2 sons King Priam did beget, one lawful, the other wantonly, both in one chariot met. Their royal foe, the baser born, Isus was charioteer, and famous Antiphus did fight, both which King Peleus' heir, whilom in Ida keeping flocks, did deprehend and bind with pliant osiers, and for price them to their sire resigned. Atrides with his well-aimed lance smote Isus on the breast, above the nipple, and his sword a mortal wound impressed beneath the ear of Antiphus. Down from their horse they fell. The king had seen the youths before, and now did know them well, remembering them the prisoners of swift Aeacides, who brought them to the sable fleet from Ida's foody leas. And as a lion having found the furrow of a hind, where she hath calved 2 little twins, at will and ease doth grind their joints snatched in his solid jaws, and crusheth into mist their tender lives, their dam though near, not able to resist, but shook with vehement fear herself, flies through the oaken chase, from that fell savage drowned in sweat, and seeks some covert place. So when with most unmatched strength the Grecian general bent, 'gainst these two princes none durst aid their native king's descent, but fled themselves before the Greeks, and where these two were slain, Pisander and Hippolochus, not able to restrain their headstrong horse, the silken reins being from their hands let fall, were brought by their unruly guides before the general. Antimachus begat them both, Antimachus that took rich gifts and gold of Helen's love, and would by no means brook just restitution should be made of Menelaus's well, bereft him with his ravished queen by Alexander's stealth. Atrides, lion-like, did charge his sons, who on their knees fell from their chariot, and besought regard to their degrees, who, being Antimachus's sons, their father would afford a worthy ransom for their lives, who in his house did hoard much hidden treasure, brass and gold, and steel wrought wondrous choice. Thus wept they, using smoothing terms, and heard this rugged voice breathe from the unrelenting king: "If you be of the breed of stout Antimachus, that stayed the honorable deed the other peers of Ilion in council had decreed, to render Helen and her wealth, and would have basely slain my brother and wise Ithacus, ambassadors to attain the most due motion, now receive wreak for his shameful part." This said, in poor Pisander's breast he fixed his wreakful dart, who upward spread the oppressed earth. His brother crouched for dread, and as he lay, the angry king cut off his arms and head, and let him like a football lie for every man to spurn. Then to the extremest heat of fight he did his valor turn, and led a multitude of Greeks where foot did foot subdue. Horse slaughtered horse, need-feathered flight, the battered centre flew, in clouds of dust about their ears, raised from the horses' hooves, that beat a thunder out of earth, as horrible as Jove's. The king, persuading speedy chase, gave his persuasions way, with his own valor slaughtering still, as in a stormy day. In thick-set woods a ravenous fire wraps in his fierce repair the shaken trees, and by the roots doth toss them into air. Even so beneath Atrides' sword flew up Troy's flying heels. Their horse drew empty chariots, and sought their thundering wheels some fresh directors through the field, where least the pursuit drives. Thick fell the Trojans, much more sweet to vultures than their wives. Then Jove drew Hector from the darts, from dust, from death and blood, and from the tumult still the king firm to the pursuit stood, till at old Ilias's monument, in midst of all the field, they reached the wild fig tree, and longed to make their town their shield. Yet there they rested not. The king still cried, "Pursue, pursue!" and all his unreproved hands did blood and dust imbrue. But when they came to Scia's ports, and to the beach of Jove, there made they stand, there every eye fixed on each other strove, who should outlook his mate amazed. Through all the field they fled, and as a lion, when the night becomes most deaf and dead, invades ox herds, affrighting all, that he of one may wreak his dreadful hunger, and his neck he first of all doth break, then laps his blood and entrails up. So Agamemnon plied the manage of the Trojan chase, and still the last man died. The other fled, a number fell by his imperial hand, some grovelling downwards from their horse, some upwards strewed the sand. High was the fury of his lance, but having beat them close beneath their walls, the both worlds' sire did now again repose on fountain-flowing Ida's tops, being newly slid from heaven, and held a lightning in his hand. From thence this charge was given to Iris with the golden wings. "Thou Mantia, fly," said he, "and tell Troy's Hector that as long as he enraged shall see, the soldier-loving Atreus' son amongst the foremost fight, the populating troops of men, so long he must excite some other to resist the foe, and he no arms advance, but when he wounded takes his horse, attained with shaft or lance, then will I fill his arm with death, even till he reach the fleet, and peaceful night treads busy day beneath her sacred feet. The wind-foot swift Amalthea obeyed, and used her wings to famous Iliad from the mount enchased with silver springs, and found in his bright chariot the hardy Trojan knight, to whom she spake the words of Jove, and vanished from his sight. He leapt upon the sounding earth, and shook his lengthful dart, and everywhere he breathed exhorts, and stirred up every heart. A dreadful fight he set on foot, his soldiers straight turned head. The Greeks stood firm in both the hosts, the field was perfected. But Agamemnon, foremost still, did all his side exceed, and would not be the first in name, unless the first in deed. Now sing, fair presidents of verse, that in the heavens embower, who first encountered with the king of all the adverse power, Iphidamus, Antenor's son, ample and bigly set, brought up in pastures springing Thrace, that doth soft sheep beget, in grave Cisseus' noble house, that was his mother's sire, fair Theano, and when his breast was heightened with the fire of gaysome youth, his grandsire gave his daughter to his love, who straight his bridal chamber left, fame with affection strove, and made him furnish 12 fair ships to lend fair Troy his hand. His ships he in Percope left, and came to Troy by land. And now he tried the fame of Greece, encountering with the king, who through his royal lance and mist Iphidamus did fling, and strook him on the arming waist beneath his coat of brass, which forced him stay upon his arm, so violent it was. Yet pierced it not his well-wrought zone, but when the lazy head tried hardness with his silver waist, it turned again like lead. He followed, grasping the ground end, but with a lion's wile, that wrests away a hunter's staff, he caught it by the pile, and plucked it from the caster's hand, whom with his sword he strook beneath the ear, and with his wound his timeless death he took. He fell and slept an iron sleep. Wretched young man, he died, far from his newly married wife, in aid of foreign pride, and saw no pleasure of his love, yet was her jointure great. 100 oxen gave he her, and vowed in his retreat 2,000 head of sheep and goats, of which he store did leave. Much gave he of his love's first fruits, and nothing did receive. When Coan, one that for his form might feast an amorous eye, and elder brother of the slain, beheld this tragedy, deep sorrow sat upon his eyes, and standing laterally, and to the general undiscerned his javelin he let fly, that twixt his elbow and his wrist transfixed his armless arm. The bright head shined on the other side. The unexpected harm impressed some horror in the king, yet so he ceased not fight, but rushed on Coan with his lance, who made what haste he might, seizing his slaughtered brother's foot to draw him from the field, and called the ablest to his aid, when under his round shield the king's brass javelin, as he drew, did strike him helpless dead, who made Iphidamus the block, and cut off Coan's head. Thus under great Atrides' arm Antenor's issue thrived, and to suffice precisest fate to Pluto's mansion dived. He with his lance, sword, mighty stones, poured his heroic wreak on other squadrons of the foe, whiles yet warm blood did break through his cleft veins. But when the wound was quite exhaust and crude, the eager anguish did approve his princely fortitude, as when most sharp and bitter pangs distract a laboring dame, which the divine Aletheia, that ruled the painful frame of human childbirth, pour on her, the Aletheia that are the daughters of Saturnia, with whose extreme repair the woman in her travail strives to take the worst it gives. With thought it must be, 'tis love's fruit, the end for which she lives, the mean to make herself new-born, what comforts will redound. So Agamemnon did sustain the torment of his wound. Then took he chariot, and to fleet bade haste his charioteer, but first poured out his highest voice to purchase every ear. Princes and leaders of the Greeks, brave friends, now from our fleet do you expel this boisterous sway. Jove will not let me meet illustrate Hector, nor give leave that I shall end the day in fight against the Ilian power. My wound is in my way. This said, his ready charioteer did scourge his spriteful horse, that freely to the sable fleet performed their fiery course, to bear their wounded sovereign apart the martial thrust, sprinkling their powerful breasts with foam, and snowing on the dust. When Hector heard of his retreat, thus he for fame contends: Trojans, Dardanians, Lycians, all my close fighting friends, think what it is to be renowned, be soldiers all of name. Our strongest enemy is gone, Jove vows to do us fame. Then in the Grecian faces drive your one-hoofed violent steeds, and far above their best be best, and glorify your deeds. Thus, as a dog-given hunter sets upon a brace of boars his white-toothed hounds, puffs, shouts, breathes terms, and on his empress pours all his wild art to make them pinch, so Hector urged his host to charge the Greeks, and he himself, most bold and active most, he brake into the heat of fight, as when a tempest raves, stoops from the clouds, and all on heaps doth cuff the purple waves. Who then was first and last he killed, when Jove did grace his deed? Asius and Autonous, Opes and Clytius' seed, Prince Dolops, and the honored sire of sweet Euryalus, Opheltes, Agelaus next, and strong Hipponous, Orus, Aesymnus, all of name. The common soldiers fell, as when the hollow flood of air in Zephyr's cheeks doth swell, and sparseth all the gathered clouds white Notus' power did draw, wraps waves in waves, hurls up the froth beat with a vehement flaw. So were the common soldiers racked in troops by Hector's hand. Then ruin had enforced such works as no Greeks could withstand. Then in their fleet they had been housed, had not Laertes' son stirred up the spirit of Diomed with this impression: Tydides, what do we sustain, forgetting what we are? Stand by me, dearest in my love. 'Twere horrible impair for our two valors to endure a customary flight, to leave our navy still engaged, and but by fits to fight. He answered, I am bent to stay, and anything sustain, but our delight to prove us men will prove but short and vain. For Jove makes Trojans instruments, and virtually then wields arms himself. Our cross affairs are not 'twixt men and men. This said, Thymbraeus with his lance he tumbled from his horse, near his left nipple wounding him. Ulysses did enforce fair Molion, minion to this king that Diomed subdued. Both sent they thence till they returned, who now the king pursued, and furrowed through the thickened troops, as when two chased boars turn head 'gainst kennels of bold hounds, and race way through their gores. So turned from flight, the forward kings showed Trojans backward death. Nor fled the Greeks, but by their wills to get great Hector breath. Then took they horse and chariot from two bold city foes, Merops Percosius' mighty sons. Their father could disclose, beyond all men, hid auguries, and would not give consent to their aggression to these wars, yet wilfully they went. for fates that others sable death and force their tragedies. Tydides slew them with his lance, and made their arms his prize. Epiricus and Hippodas Ulysses reft of light, but Jove, that out of Ida looked, then equalized the fight. A Grecian for a Trojan then paid tribute to the fates, yet royal Diomed slew one, even in those even debates. That was of name more than the rest, Paeon's renowned son. The prince Agastrophus his lance into his hip did run. His squire detained his horse apart, that hindered him to fly, which he repented at his heart, yet did his feet apply. His scape with all the speed they had, alongst the foremost bands, and there his loved life dissolved. This Hector understands, and rushed with clamour on the king, right soundly seconded, with troops of Trojans, which perceived by famous Diomed the deep conceit of Jove's high will, stiffened his royal hair, who spake to near-fought Ithacus, "The fate of this affair is bent to us. Come, let us stand," and bound his violence. Thus threw he his long javelin forth, which smote his head's defence, full on the top, yet pierced no skin. Brass took repulse with brass. His helm with 3 folds made and sharp, the gift of Phoebus was. The blow made Hector take the troop, sunk him upon his hand, and struck him blind. The king pursued before the foremost band, his dart's recovery, which he found laid on the purple plain. By which time Hector was revived, and taking horse again, was fair commixed within his strength, and fled his darksome grave. He followed with his thirsty lance, and this elusive brave. Once more be thankful to thy heels, proud dog, for thy escape. Mischief sat near thy bosom now, and now another rape hath thy Apollo made of thee, to whom thou well mayest pray, when through the singing of our darts thou find such guarded way. But I shall meet with thee at length, and bring thy latest hour, if with like favour any god be fautor of my power. Meanwhile some other shall repay what I suspend in thee. This said, he set the wretched soul of Paeon's issue free, whom his late wound not fully slew, but Priam's amorous birth. Against Tydides bent his bow, hid with a hill of earth, part of a ruinated tomb for honoured Ilus built. And as the cuirass of the slain, engraved and richly gilt, Tydides from his breast had spoiled, and from his shoulders raft, his target and his solid helm he shot, and his keen shaft, that never flew from him in vain, did nail unto the ground the king's right foot. The spleenful knight laughed sweetly at the wound, crept from his covert and triumphed. "Now art thou maimed," said he, "and would to God my happy hand had so much honoured me, to have infixed it in thy breast as deep as in thy foot, even to the expulture of thy soul. Then blessed had been my shoot of all the Trojans, who had then breathed from their long unrests, who fear thee as the braying goats abhor the king of beasts." Undaunted Diomed replied, "You braver with your bow, you slick-haired lover, you that hunt and fleer at wenches so. Durst thou but stand in arms with me, thy silly archery would give thee little cause to vaunt. As little suffer I in this same tall exploit of thine, performed when thou wert hid, as if a woman or a child that knew not what it did had touched my foot. A coward's steel hath never any edge, but mine, to assure it sharp, still lays dead carcasses in pledge. Touch it, it renders lifeless straight, it strikes the fingers' ends of hapless widows in their cheeks, and children blind of friends. The subject of it makes earth red, and air with sighs inflames, and leaves limbs more embraced with birds than with enamoured dames." Lance-famed Ulysses now came in, and stepped before the king. kneeled opposite, and drew the shaft. The eager pain did sting through all his body. Straight he took his royal chariot there, and with direction to the fleet did charge his charioteer. End of the 11th book, Part 1. The 11th book of Homer's Iliads, Part 2. Now was Ulysses desolate, fear made no friend remain. He thus spake to his mighty mind, what doth my state sustain? If I should fly this odds in fear, that thus comes clustering on, 'twere high dishonour, yet 'twere worse to be surprised alone. 'Tis Jove that drives the rest to fight, but that's a faint excuse. Why do I tempt my mind so much? Pale cowards fight refuse. He that affects renown in war must like a rock be fixed. Wound or be wounded, valor's truth puts no respect betwixt. In this contention with himself, in flew the shady bands of targeteers, who sieged him round with mischief-filled hands. As when a crew of gallants watch the wild mews of a boar, their dogs put after in full cry, he rusheth on before. Whets with his lather-making jaws his crooked tusks for blood, and holding firm his usual haunts, breaks through the deepened wood. They charging, though his hot approach be never so abhorred, so to assail the Jove-loved Greek the Ilians did accord, and he made through them. First he hurt, upon his shoulder blade, Diops, a blameless man-at-arms, then sent to endless shade Thoon and Eunomus, and strook the strong Chersidamus, as from his chariot he leaped down beneath his targe of brass, who fell and crawled upon the earth with his sustaining palms, and left the fight, nor yet his lance left dealing martial alms. But Socus' brother by both sides young Charops did impress. Then princely Socus to his aid made brotherly access, and coming near spake in his charge, O great Laertes' son, insatiate in sly stratagems, and labours never done. This hour or thou shalt boast to kill the two Hippocydes, and prize their arms, or fall thyself in my resolved access. This said, he threw quite through his shield his fell and well-driven lance, which held way through his cuirasses, and on his ribs did glance, ploughing the flesh along his sides, but Pallas did repel all inward passage to his life. Ulysses knowing well the wound undeadly, setting back his foot to form his stand, thus spake to Socus, O thou wretch, thy death is in this hand, that stayed my victory on Troy, and where thy charge was made, in doubtful terms, or this or that, this shall thy life invade. This frighted Socus to retreat, and in his faint reverse, the lance betwixt his shoulders fell, and through his breast did pierce. Down fell he sounding, and the king thus played with his misease. O Socus, you that make by birth the two Hippocydes, now may your house and you perceive death can outfly the flyer. Ah, wretch, thou canst not scape my vows. Old Hippasus thy sire, nor thy well-honoured mother's hands, in both which lies thy worth, shall close thy wretched eyes in death, but vultures dig them forth, and hide them with their darksome wings. But when Ulysses dies, divinest Greeks shall tomb my corse with all their obsequies. Now from his body and his shield the violent lance he drew, that princely Socus had infixed, which drawn a crimson dew, fell from his bosom on the earth, the wound did dare him sore. And when the furious Trojans saw Ulysses' forced gore, encouraging themselves in gross, all his destruction vowed. Then he retired and summoned aid. Thrice shouted he aloud, as did denote a man engaged. Thrice Menelaus' ear observed his aid suggesting voice, and Ajax being near, he told him of Ulysses' shouts, as if he were enclosed from all assistance, and advised their aids might be disposed against the ring that circled him, lest, charged with troops alone, though valiant, he might be oppressed, whom Greece so built upon. He led, and Ajax seconded. They found their Jove-loved king, circled with foes, as when a den of bloody lucernes cling about a goodly palmed heart, hurt with a hunter's bow, whose scape his nimble feet enforce, whilst his warm blood doth flow, and his light knees have power to move, but mastered of his wound, embossed within a shady hill, the lucernes charge him round, and tear his flesh, when instantly fortune sends in the powers of some stern lion, with whose sight they fly, and he devours. So charged the Ilians Ithacus, many and mighty men, but then made Menelaus in, and horrid Ajax then. Bearing a target like a tower, close was his violent stand, and every way the foe dispersed, when by the royal hand kind Menelaus led away the hurt Laertes' son, till his fair squire had brought his horse. Victorious Telamon still plied the foe, and put to sword a young Priomedes. Doriclus, Priam's bastard son, then did his lance impress Panducus, and strong Pyrasus, Lysander and Palertes, as when a torrent from the hills, swollen with Saturnian showers, falls on the fields, bears blasted oaks, and withered rosin flowers, loose weeds and all dispersed filth, into the ocean's force. So matchless Ajax beat the field, and slaughtered men and horse. Yet had not Hector heard of this, who fought on the left wing of all the host, near those sweet herbs Scamander's flood doth spring, where many foreheads trod the ground, and where the skirmish burned, near Nestor and King Idomen, where Hector overturned the Grecian squadrons, offering high service with his lance, and skilful manage of his horse, nor yet the discrepance he made in death betwixt the hosts, had made the Greeks retire, if fair-haired Helen's second spouse had not repressed the fire of bold Machaon's fortitude, who with a three-forked head in his right shoulder wounded him. Then had the Grecians dread, lest in his strength declined the foe should slaughter their hurt friend. Then Crete's king urged Neleides his chariot to ascend, and getting near him take him in, and bear him to their tents. A surgeon is to be preferred with physic ornaments before a multitude. His life gives hurt, lives native bounds, with sweet inspersion of fit balms, and perfect search of wounds. Thus spake the royal Idomen. Neleides obeyed, and to his chariot presently the wounded Greek conveyed. The son of Aesculapius, the great physician, to fleet they flew. Cebriones perceived the slaughter done by Ajax on the other troops, and spake to Hector thus: Whiles we encounter Grecians here, stern Telamonius is yonder raging, turning up in heaps our horse and men. I know him by his spacious shield. Let us turn chariot then, where both of horse and foot the fight most hotly is proposed, in mutual slaughters. Hark, their throats from cries are never closed. This said, with his shrill scourge he struck the horse that fast ensued, stung with his lashes, tossing shields and carcasses imbrued. The chariot tree was drowned in blood, and the arches by the seat dispurpled from the horse's hoofs, and from the wheel bands beat. Great Hector longed to break the ranks, and startle their close fight, who horribly amazed the Greeks, and plied their sudden fright. With busy weapons ever winged, his lance, sword, weighty stones, yet charged he other leaders' hands, not dreadful Talamon's, with whom he wisely shunned foul blows, but Jove, that weighs above all human powers, to Ajax' breast divine repressions drove, and made him shun who shunned himself. He ceased from fight amazed, cast on his back his sevenfold shield, and round about him gazed, like one turned wild, looked on himself in his distract retreat. Knee before knee did scarcely move, as when from herds of neat whole threaves of boars and mongrels chase a lion skulking near, loath he should taint the well-prized fat of any stall-fed steer. Consuming all the night in watch, he, greedy of his prey, oft thrusting on is oft thrust off, so thick the javelins play on his bold charges, and so hot the burning firebrands shine, which he, though horrible, abhors about his glowing eye. And early his great heart retires, so Ajax from the foe, for fear their fleet should be inflamed, 'gainst his swollen heart did go. As when a dull mill ass comes near a goodly field of corn, kept from the birds by children's cries, the boys are overborne by his insensible approach, and simply he will eat, about whom many wands are broke, and still the children beat, and still the self-providing ass doth with their weakness bear, not stirring till his paunch be full, and scarcely then will steer. So the huge son of Telamon amongst the Trojans fared, bore showers of darts upon his shield, yet scorned to fly as scared, and so kept softly on his way, nor would he mend his pace, for all their violent pursuits, that still did arm the chase with singing lances. But at last, when their cur-like presumes, more urged the more forborne, his spirits did rarefy their fumes, and he revoked his active strength, turned head and did repel the horse troops that were new made in, twixt whom the fight grew fell. And by degrees he stole retreat, yet with such puissant stay, that none could pass him to the fleet. In both the armies' sway he stood, and from strong hands received sharp javelins on his shield, where many stuck, thrown on before, many fell short in field, ere the white body they could reach, and stuck as telling how they proposed to have pierced his flesh. His peril pierced now the eyes of Prince Eurypylus, Evaemon's famous son, who came close on, and with his dart struck Duke Apisaon, whose surname was Phociades, even to the concrete blood that makes the liver on the earth outgushed his vital blood. Eurypylus made in, and eased his shoulders of his arms, which Paris seeing, he drew his bow, and wreaked in part the harms of his good friend Phociades. His arrow he let fly, that smote Eurypylus, and brake in his attainted thigh. Then took he troop to shun black death, and to the flyers cried, "Princes and leaders of the Greeks, stand and repulse the tide of this our honor-racking chase. Ajax is drowned in darts. I fear past scape. Turn, honored friends, help out his venturous parts." Thus spake the wounded Greek. The sound cast on their backs their shields, and raised their darts, to whose relief Ajax his person wields. Then stood he firmly with his friends, retiring there retire, and thus both hosts indifferent joined, the fight grew hot as fire. Now had Neleides' sweating steeds brought him and his hurt friend amongst their fleet, Eocides, that wishly did intend, standing astern his tall-necked ship, how deep the skirmish drew amongst the Greeks, and with what ruth the insecution grew. Saw Nestor bring Machaon hurt, and from within did call his friend Patroclus, who like Mars in form celestial, came forth with first sound of his voice, first spring of his decay, and asked his princely friend's desire. "Dear friend," said he, "this day I doubt not will enforce the Greeks to swarm about my knees. I see unsuffered need employed in their extremities. Go, sweet Patroclus, and inquire of old Neleides, whom he brought wounded from the fight, by his back parts, I guess, It is Machaon, but his face I could not well descry, they passed me in such earnest speed. Patroclus presently obeyed his friend, and ran to know they now descended were, and Nestor's squire Eurymedon the horses did ungear, themselves stood near the extremest shore, to let the gentle air dry up their sweat. Then to the tent, where Hecamed the fair set chairs, and for the wounded prince a potion did prepare. This Hecamed, by war's hard feat, fell to old Nestor's share, when Thetis' son Sactanidos, she was the princely seed of worthy King Arsinous, and by the Greeks decreed the prize of Nestor, since all men in counsel he surpassed. First a fair table she opposed, of which the feet were graced with bluish metal mixed with black, and on the same she put a brass fruit dish, in which she served a wholesome onion cut, for pittance to the potion, and honey newly wrought, and bread, the fruit of sacred meal. Then to the board she brought a right fair cup, with gold studs driven, which Nestor did transfer from Pylos, on whose swelling sides 4 handles fixed were, and upon every handle sat a pair of doves of gold, some billing and some pecking meat. 2 gilt feet did uphold the antique body, and withal so weighty was the cup, that being proposed brimful of wine, one scarce could lift it up. Yet Nestor drunk in it with ease, spite of his years' respect. In this the goddess-like fair dame a potion did confect, with good old wine of Pramnius, and scraped into the wine cheese made of goat's milk, and on it spursed flour exceeding fine. In this sort for the wounded lord the potion she prepared, and bade him drink, for company with him old Nestor shared. Thus physically quenched they thirst, and then their spirits revived, with pleasant conference. And now Patroclus, being arrived, made stay at the entry of the tent. Old Nestor, seeing it, rose and received him by the hand, and fain would have him sit. He set that courtesy aside, excusing it with haste, since his much-to-be reverenced friend sent him to know who passed, wounded with him in chariot, so swiftly through the shore. Whom now, said he, I see and know, and now can stay no more. You know, good father, our great friend is apt to take offence, whose fiery temper will inflame sometimes with innocence. He answered, When will Peleus' son some royal pity show on his thus wounded countrymen? Ah, is he yet to know how much affliction tires our host, how our especial aid, tainted with lances at their tents, are miserably laid? Ulysses, Diomed, our king, Eurypylus, Machaon, all hurt, and all our worthiest friends. Yet no compassion can supple thy friend's friendless breast. Doth he reserve his eye till our fleet burn, and we ourselves one after other die? Alas, my forces are not now as in my younger life. O would to God I had that strength, I use it in the strife betwixt us and the Ilians, for oxen to be driven, when Timoneus' lofty soul was by my valor given as sacrifice to destiny, Epiricus' strong son, that dwelt in Elis, and fought first in our contention. We forged, as proclaimed foes, a wondrous wealthy boot, and he in rescue of his herds fell breathless at my foot. All the Dorp boars with terror fled, our prey was rich and great, twice 25 flocks of sheep, as many herds of neat, as many goats and nasty swine, and 150 mares, all sorrow most with suckling foals, and these soon moneyed wares we drave into Neleus' town, fair Pylos, all by night. My father's heart was glad to see so much good fortune quite the forward mind of his young son, that used my youth in deeds, and would not smother it in moods, now drew the sun's bright steeds late from the hills. Our heralds now excited all that were damaged by the Ilians. Our princes did appear, our boot was parted, Many men the Achaeans much did owe, that being our neighbours they did spoil. Afflictions did so flow on us poor Pylians, though but few. In great Hercules to our sad confines of late years, and wholly did suppress our hapless princes. 26 sons renowned Neleus bred. Only myself am left of all, the rest subdued and dead. And this was it that made so proud the base Epean bands, on their near neighbours, being oppressed, to lay injurious hands. A herd of oxen for himself, a mighty flock of sheep, my sire selected, and made choice of shepherds for their keep. And from the general spoil he culled 300 of the best. The Ilians awed him infinite, most plagued of all the rest. 4 wager-winning horse he lost, and chariots intervented, being led to an appointed race. The prize that was presented was a religious 3-foot urn. Augeas was the king that did detain them, and dismiss their keeper sorrowing, for his love charge lost with foul words. Then both for words and deeds, my sire being worthily incensed, thus justly he proceeds to satisfaction in first choice of all our wealthy prize. And as he shared much he left his subjects to suffice, that none might be oppressed with power, or want his portion due. Thus for the public good we shared. Then we to temples drew our complete city, and to heaven we thankful rites did burn for our rich conquest. The 3rd day ensuing our return, the Ilians flew on us in heaps. Their general leaders were the 2 Moliones, 2 boys untrained in the fear of horrid war or use of strength. A certain city shines upon a lofty prominent, and in the extreme confines of sandy Pylos, seated where Alpheus's flood doth run, and called Thriessa. This they sieged, and gladly would have won, but having passed through all our fields, Minerva as our spy fell from Olympus in the night, and armed us instantly. Nor mustered she unwilling men, nor unprepared for force. My sire yet would not let me arm, but hid away my horse. Esteeming me no soldier yet shined I nothing less. Among our gallants, though on foot, Minerva's mightiness led me to fight, and made me bear a soldier's worthy name. There is a flood falls into sea, and his crooked course doth frame, close to Arena, and is called bright Menaius' stream. There made we halt, and there the sun cast many a glorious beam on our bright armours, horse and foot, in seed together there. Then marched we on. By fiery noon we saw the sacred clear of great Alpheus, where to Jove we did fair sacrifice. And to the azure god, that rules the under liquid skies, we offered up a solemn bowl, a bowl to Alpheus' name. And to the blue-eyed maid we burned a heifer never tame. Now was it night, we supped and slept about the flood in arms. The foe laid hard siege to our town, and shook it with alarms. But for prevention of their spleens, a mighty work of war appeared behind them, for as soon as Phoebus' fiery car cast night's foul darkness from his wheels, invoking reverend Jove, and the unconquered made his birth, we did the event approve, and gave them battle. First of all, I slew, the army saw, the mighty soldier Mulius, Aegeus' son-in-law, and spoiled him of his one-hoofed horse. His elder daughter was bright Agamemnon, that for skill in simples did surpass, and knew as many kind of drugs as earth's broad centre bred. Him charged I with my brass-armed lance, the dust received him dead. I, leaping to his chariot, amongst the foremost pressed, and the great-hearted Ilians fled frighted, seeing their best and loftiest soldier taken down, the general of their horse. I followed like a black whirlwind, and did for prize and force full 50 chariots, every one furnished with 2 armed men, who ate the earth, slain with my lance. And I had slaughtered then the 2 young boys, Moliones, if their world-circling sire great Neptune had not safe their lives, and covered their retire with unpierced clouds, then Jove bestowed a haughty victory upon us Pylians, for so long we did the chase apply, slaughtering and making spoil of arms, till sweet Buprasius' soil, Elysius and Olenia, were framed with our recoil. For there Minerva turned our power, and there the last I slew, as when our battle joined the first, the Pylians then withdrew to Pylus from Buprasius. Of all the immortals then, they most thanked Jove for victory, Nestor the most of men. Such was I ever, if I were employed with other peers, and I had honour of my youth, which dies not in my years. And great Achilles only joys ability of act in his brave prime, and doth not deign to impart it where 'tis lacked. No doubt he will extremely mourn long after that black hour, wherein our ruin shall be brought, and rue his ruthless power. O friend, my memory revives the charge Menetius gave, thy towardness when thou set'st forth to keep out of the grave our wounded honour. I myself and wise Ulysses were within the room, where every word then spoken we did hear. For we were come to Peleus' court, as we did mustering pass, through rich Achaia, where thy sire Menetius was, thyself and great Aeacides, when Peleus the king to thunder-loving Jove did burn an ox for offering in his courtyard. A cup of gold crowned with red wine he held, on the holy accessory poured. You, when the ox was felled, were dressing his divided limbs. We in the portal stood. Achilles, seeing us come so near, his honourable blood was struck with a respective shame, rose, took us by the hands, brought us both in, and made us sit, and used his kind commands for seemly hospitable rites, which quickly were opposed. Then, after needfulness of food, I first of all disclosed the royal cause of our repair, moved you and your great friend to concert our renowned designs, both straight did condescend. Your fathers knew it, gave consent, and grave instruction to both your valours. Peleus charged his most unequalled son to govern his victorious strength, and shine past all the rest in honour, as in mere main force. Then were thy partings blessed with dear advices from thy sire. My loved son, said he, Achilles, by his grace of birth, superior is to thee, and for his force more excellent, yet thou more ripe in years. Then with sound counsels, age's fruits, employ his honoured years. Command and overrule his moods, his nature will obey in any charge discreetly given, that doth his good assay. Thus charge thy sire, which thou forgett'st, yet now at last approve, with forced reference of these, the attraction of his love, who knows if sacred influence may bless thy good intent, and enter with thy gracious words, even to his full consent. The admonition of a friend is sweet and vehement. If any oracle he shun, or if his mother queen hath brought him some instinct from Jove that fortifies his spleen, let him resign command to thee of all his myrmidons, and yield by that means some repulse to our confusions, adorning thee in his bright arms, that his resembled form may haply make thee thought himself, and calm this hostile storm, that so a little we may ease our overcharged hands, draw some breath, not expire it all, the foe but faintly stands beneath his labours, and your charge being fierce and freshly given, they easily from our tents and fleet may to their walls be driven. This moved the good Patroclus' mind, who made his utmost haste to inform his friend, and as the fleet of Ithacus he passed, at which their markets were disposed, councils and martial courts, and where to the altars of the gods they made divine resorts, he met renowned Eurypylus, Evaemon's noble son. Halting, his thigh hurt with a shaft, the liquid sweat did run down from his shoulders and his brows, and from his raging wound flowed forth his melancholy blood, yet still his mind was sound. His sight in kind Patroclus's breast to sacred pity turned, and, nothing more immartial for true ruth, thus he mourned, "Ah, wretched progeny of Greece, princes, dejected kings, was it your fates to nourish beasts and serve the outcast wings of savage vultures here in Troy? Tell me, Evaemon's fame, do yet the Greeks withstand his force, whom yet no force can tame? Or are they hopeless thrown to death by his resistless lance?" "Divine Patroclus," he replied, "no more can Greece advance defensive weapons, but to fleet they headlong must retire. For those that to this hour have held our fleet from hostile fire, and are the bulwarks of our host, lie wounded at their tents, and Troy's unvanquishable power still as it toils augments. But take me to thy black stern ship, save me, and from my thigh cut out this arrow, and the blood that is ingored and dry. Wash with warm water from the wound, then gentle salves apply, which thou knowest best, thy princely friend hath taught thee surgery, whom of all centaurs the most just Chiron did institute. Thus to thy honorable hands my ease I prosecute. Since our physicians cannot help, Machaon at his tent needs a physician himself, being leech and patient, and Podalirius in the field the sharp conflict sustains. Strong Menetiides replied, "How shall I ease thy pains? What shall we do, Eurypylus? Am I to use all haste to signify to Thetis' son occurrents that have passed at Nestor's honorable suit? But be that work achieved, when this is done, I will not leave thy torments unrelieved." This said, athwart his back he cast, beneath his breast his arm, and nobly helped him to his tent. His servants, seeing his harm, dispread ox hides upon the earth, whereon Machaon lay. Patroclus cut out the sharp shaft, and clearly washed away with lukewarm water the black blood. Then twixt his hands he bruised a sharp and mitigatory root, which when he had infused into the green, well-cleansed wound, the pains he felt before were well, and instantly allayed, the wound did bleed no more. End of the 11th book, Part 2.